Disney Moana, a day with Moana. The morning sun rose high over Montanui as Moana headed through the village. "Good morning," Moana said, approaching two women with baskets of food. "How are things?" "Hi, Moana. It's a fine day, but we are low on sugarcane and won't have enough for what we're making." "I can help," Moana volunteered. "I'll gather some more for you." "Can we come too?" a girl named Fatua asked Moana. "We love exploring." "Yes, but we all have to stick together. The island is big and I don't want anyone to get lost. But if something does happen, just say where you are and wait for me to come find you," Moana said. "We promise," the children said. They were so excited to spend the day with Moana. Moana and the children set off toward the forest. "I love sugarcane," a girl named Masina said. Moana and the children talked about how many things they use sugarcane for. "I like to just eat it by itself," a boy named Tao said. The forest was full of giant trees, colorful plants, and rocks and boulders of all sizes. Without any clear path to walk along, it was obvious why Moana had to hold them to stick together. Moana looked for visual signs to help her find her way. "See, that rock over there looks like Pau," Moana said. The kids loved Pua and could picture him if he were right there. Moana pulled aside some thick green vines, revealing a large grove of coconut trees. "Can we stop for a snack?" Laumei asked. "That's just what I was thinking," Moana replied. Laumei and Tao scrambled up a tree. They picked the ripest fruits, then tossed them down. After they broke open the coconuts against the rock, they devoured the white meat and drank the sweet water inside. It was a refreshing break. "Do we have time for a game?" Fatua asked. Since they'd reached the coconut grove sooner than Moana had expected, she figured a quick game wouldn't hurt. "How about a round of hide and seek?" she asked. "Yes!" the children exclaimed. They scampered in every direction. "But stay close by," Moana called after them. She shut her eyes and began to count. While he was looking for a place to hide, Toa saw a colorful bird he'd never seen before. He began to follow the bird. "Time's up," Moana yelled. She opened her eyes and began to look for the children. In a matter of minutes, Moana had found Fatua, Laumei, and Masina. That meant only Toa was left, but no matter where she looked, Moana couldn't find him. "Good job, Toa. You found the best hiding spot. You can come out now," Moana said. When he didn't appear, Moana was worried he was lost. Meanwhile, Toa had followed the colorful bird all the way back to its nest. He turned around to show his friends, but realized he was all alone. He started to worry, but he remembered what Moana had said earlier, and he sat down and waited for her to find him. Moana and the other children went back through the vines towards the Pua-shaped rock. It was there that Moana noticed some bright blue feathers. "Maybe he went this way," she said. They picked up the feathers and continued walking. Not far away, they came upon another clearing, and there was someone familiar sitting on a rock. "Toa!" Fatua cried, and Moana hugged him. They were relieved to see he was safe and sound. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to go off so far. I was following that bird, and it ended up here." He pointed to a nest in a tree hollow. Moana looked up to see a bird with several baby chicks. Toa had stumbled upon a mother bird, and she was returning to her family. "Well, it looks like everyone is back together again," Moana said, smiling. "Look over there," directed Fatua. "That's the tallest grass I've ever seen," added Masina. Moana followed the girls and couldn't believe her eyes. Thanks to their unexpected detour, they had found a shortcut to the sugarcane field. This is exactly what we're looking for, Moana cheered. She broke off pieces of sugarcane stalks and passed them to the children, who arranged them in piles. After gathering as much as their arms could carry, it was time to head home. Before we go, Moana said, let's create a sign to mark this new shortcut. They carved an outline of the bird into the ground with sticks. Finally, they stuck the blue feathers they'd collected in the ground next to their new landmark. It was a perfect way to end the afternoon. Soon, Moana and the children arrived back in the village. Moana gave the basket of sugarcane to the women, who were delighted to see the bright, juicy stalks. Thank you, Moana, one woman exclaimed. These are wonderful. It was our pleasure, Moana replied. As they said goodbye, Moana gave each children a honki, pressing her nose against theirs. When I grow up, I want to be just like you, Toa said. Moana was touched. As Grandma Tala says, you can be whatever your heart tells you. Moana smiled all the way home. Her heart felt as full as a basket of sugarcane. Disney Moana, A Pig Named Pua. Grandma Tala and Moana were having fun on the shore one morning, when Moana's father, Chief Tui, walked by carrying a litter of piglets. Moana ran over to the basket. When she overheard her father talking about taking the pigs to a farmer on the other side of the island, she raised her hand and volunteered to go with him. Moana hurried to the canoe with her father. To her, there was nothing better than being near the water. After helping push off, she climbed on board with the basket of piglets. The smallest one isn't getting any food, she said. There isn't too much you can do about that now, but you can come here and help me, Tua said, holding up the oar. Steer us straight out. When they arrived on the other side of the island, Tui jumped into the water. Moana joined him and helped drag the canoe into the sand. But she kept glancing back at the little piglet. Moana and Tui took the basket to the farmer. The farmer put the pigs into a pen. The round, plump piglets scampered over to their mother, quickly crowding out the tiny one. They're not even giving him a chance, said Moana. Sometimes that happens with a pig litter, said the farmer. When Tui and the farmer walked off, Moana leaned into the pen and whispered, Maybe I can feed him. She gently lifted the tiny piglet out and held his soft body against hers. Moana acted swiftly. She rolled up a leaf and filled it with coconut milk. As the milk touched his lips, the piglet let out a weak squeal. Then he began to drink. Moana fed the piglet until he was full and happy. You are Pua, said Moana. There, I have named you. In that moment, Moana and Pua each knew they had found a great friend. Moana, Tui called. Moana wrapped Pua in a leaf and headed toward her father. I fed him, said Moana proudly, and he ate. The farmer chuckled. I think that means he's yours, he said. Tua gave Moana a stern look, but he didn't say she couldn't keep the pig. His name is Pua, Moana announced as she climbed into the canoe. Well, put Pua down and help us get home, said Tui. Moana did as she was told. Then she dipped the sail, leaning back just like Tui had shown her. Tui smiled. Good. When they got home, Moana told her mother and Grandma Tala, The whole story, from sailing the canoe to feeding the piglet. Tala nudged Tui. She listened to her heart. And her father, Tui said. From that night on, Pua slept beside Moana. Whenever he awoke with a squeal, she fed him, and he became stronger. As Pua grew, so did their friendship. Pua loved to bring Moana gifts like little coconuts and seashells. But sometimes the seashells contained more than Pua expected. One of their favorite games was pretending to go fishing. Then they'd bring in nets full of their imaginary catch to the village. At the end of each day, the friends watched the sunset, enjoying the way the light danced on the ocean, and, more than anything else, being together. Disney Moana, me, Maui. This is Maui. He is a shape-shifting demigod with a magical fishhook. Many, many years ago, Maui did something he shouldn't have. He stole the heart of Te Fiti, the mother island, and then he lost the heart and his fishhook. After that, a darkness began spreading over the world. Moana is from the island of Motunui. The ocean gave Moana the heart of Te Fiti so she can make things better. When Moana was a teenager, she found Maui. Maui didn't want to help. He took Moana's canoe and sailed away. Before long, the ocean swooped Moana up and placed her in the canoe. If you put the heart back and save the world, you'd be everyone's hero, Moana told Maui. He liked the sound of that, but first, he needed his fishhook. Maui used his expert wayfinding skills to sail their canoe away from a crowd of tiny coconut-armored bandits, all the way to Laulotai, the realm of monsters. Maui's fishhook was stuck on the shell of a 50-foot crab monster who collected shiny objects. Working together, Maui and Moana got the fishhook without being eaten or crushed. At first, Maui had trouble using his magical fishhook because he had lost his confidence. He shape-shifted into a bug and a pig without meaning to. After heart-to-heart talk with Moana, Maui kept practicing. Soon, all his skills were back. Maui shape-shifted into a hawk and bravely flew toward Tika, an enormous monster of lava and ash. He had to get past Tika to reach Te Fiti and restore her heart. Go save the world, Moana cheered. But Maui was knocked right out of the sky. The two friends didn't give up. Maui used his fishhook to block Tefa's fiery fist as Moana sailed past to reach Te Fiti. But Te Fiti was gone, and Moana realized she needed to give the heart to Tika. Maui watched proudly as Moana placed the heart in Tika's glowing spiral. Tika transformed back into Te Fiti. The islands were saved. Maui and Moana were heroes. They will be friends forever. Disney Moana, our perfect stormy day. A storm passed over Motunui Island one morning. Most people didn't welcome the cold and wet weather. But Moana was not most people. She decided to visit Grandma Tala. Drenched by the rain, Moana, Pua, and Heihei slid into Grandma's tala fell with a crash. Now that was an entrance, laughed Grandma Tala as she went in for a hug. We are soaked, Moana warned, but Grandma Tala didn't mind. Good thing rain is water, and water dries, she said. Now get settled. I have a new story about a storm. I've been waiting for the perfect day to share it with you. Everyone settled in, and Grandma began to speak. But Moana couldn't focus. She heard a drip, drip, drip. Moana looked up and spotted a small hole in the ceiling. Grandma, you have a leak, interrupted Moana. Let me fix it for you. But Grandma Tala waved her off. Never mind that old leak. We learned to live together a long time ago. Moana tried her best, but she couldn't ignore the puddle forming on the floor. Grandma cannot patch that leak on her own, Moana thought, but I can. If I'm quick, she might not even notice I was gone. With that, Moana climbed up to the ceiling. When Moana finished, she slid back down and landed, plop, right in front of Grandma. Grandma Tala laughed. Thank you, Moana. No leak is safe from you, she said with a playful nudge. Now, can I get back to my story? Moana nodded in reply. Grandma Tala was just gearing up when clap, crackle, boom, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The weather frightened Pua, who jumped sky high and crashed into a pile of Grandma Tala's prized storytelling tapas. Oh, Grandma, your tapa, cried Moana. She rushed to clean up the mess, but Grandma Tala insisted Moana stop. The tapa can wait, Grandma Tala said. Come and sit. I'm finally getting to the good part. Moana took a seat and Grandma Tala continued. Outside, the wind howled and the veil-woven curtain flapped widely. Not only that, Heihei had wandered outside, and the wind was blowing with him around like a tumbleweed. Moana's eyes were locked on the swirling bird. With a final whoosh, Heihei re-entered the veil and somersaulted across Grandma Tala's floor. Just then, Moana noticed that Grandma Tala had stopped speaking. I'm sorry, Grandma, she said. I keep getting distracted, when all I really want to do is spend time with you. Grandma Tala pressed her nose against Moana's, and Moana took Grandma Tala's hand in hers. One more time, Moana said, and I promise I'm listening. Then once again, Grandma Tala began her story, and Moana soaked up every word. Outside, the storm continued, but inside, nothing could dampen Moana and Grandma Tala's perfect stormy day. Disney Moana. One of the most famous legends told on the island of Motunui was the one of Maui, a shape-shifting demigod with a magical fish hook who stole the heart of Te Fiti. With the heart gone, a terrible darkness spread across the world, draining the islands of life. Moana loves stories, and when she was very young, the ocean gave her the heart of Te Fiti, so that one day she could set things right. When Moana turned 16, Chief Tui took her to the top of the highest mountain on Motunui. It was a sacred place where each village's chief embraced their role as leader of their people. One day, Moana would lead her people. Moana couldn't help staring out at the ocean, but her father reminded her that her future was here, not at sea. One day, Grandma Tala led Moana to a hidden passage. Inside was a giant cavern filled with ocean-voyaging canoes. As Moana beat the drum, she could see in her mind generations of her people sailing the open sea. Grandma Tala explained to Moana that the ocean had chosen her to sail beyond the reef to find Maui and restore the heart of Te Fiti. Moana knew it was time to find Maui. She gathered supplies and pushed one of her carving canoes into the lagoon. She paddled toward the reef and took a deep breath. It was a challenge steering the canoe in the open sea. Huge waves swamped the canoe, and Moana and her stowaway, Heihei, were swept away. They washed up on a rocky little island, but they were not alone. The demigod Maui appeared. Maui was excited to have a visitor, and he assumed Moana was here to thank him for all he'd done for humans. He exuberantly recounted some of his greatest accomplishments. Then, just as Moana was feeling really good about Maui, he trapped her inside a cave. He was going to use Moana's canoe to retrieve his magical fishhook alone. But Moana was able to escape, and the ocean quickly plopped her onto the canoe. Maui was intent on throwing Moana overboard until they were interrupted by a group of kakamora. The little creatures with coconut armor were everywhere, climbing the rigging and throwing sharp spears. Moana and Maui were able to work together to escape them and sail away. After defeating the kakamora, Moana and Maui sailed to Lalotai to find Maui's fishhook. He needed it for his powers to come back. Lalotai was a mysterious land full of monsters, and Maui's fishhook happened to be on the back of a giant crab named Tamatoa. Luckily, Tamatoa liked shiny things, and Moana was able to distract him with the heart of Te Fiti. Moana and Maui managed to escape Lalotai with Maui's fishhook. Moana and Maui were ready to face Tika. Maui shape-shifted into a hawk and distracted Tika, while Moana sailed to find Te Fiti. But when Moana made it to the other side, Te Fiti was gone. There was nowhere to return the heart. Suddenly, Moana knew what she had to do. Gently, Moana reached out and placed the heart into Tika's chest. Suddenly, Tika transformed into Te Fiti. She lifted Moana and Maui in her hand. Maui apologized for stealing her heart, and she accepted his apology. Life bloomed again, spreading to the very edges of the island and beyond. When she returned home, Moana couldn't wait to show her people a new kind of life, a world of voyaging. Disney Moana, Becoming Shiny. On a summer day, Moana was telling stories with the village children when they asked to hear a scary story about one of her adventures. One about Lalotai, the children chanted. Moana grinned. Oh, you want to hear about the realm of monsters, huh? She started her story. When Maui and I were on our adventure to return the heart of Te Fiti, we visited Lalotai. And there we met a giant crab monster named Tamatoa. Oh, the kids exclaimed. You see, Tamatoa is a collector of all types of treasures, especially shiny ones. And he had Maui's fishhook, so we needed to go to his lair to get it. Wait, a little boy cried out. Why does Tamatoa like shiny things? Moana considered this. She thought about what the crab monster had told her when she'd met him and the legend she learned about him since. Well, Tamatoa thought he could make himself beautiful by putting shiny things on his shell. He always believed outer beauty was more important than inner beauty. Moana began her story. It all began when Tamatoa was growing. Monsters like to hear scary stories too. But do you know who their stories were about? The kids shook their heads. Maui, Moana exclaimed. Her audience burst into a fit of giggles. He had defeated so many monsters that a lot of them were afraid of him. And everyone knew two things about Maui. That he had a powerful fish hook and that he was covered in magical tattoos. These stories inspired little Tamota. He wanted to be feared by everyone, including Maui. He wanted to be the most amazing monster in all of Lalotai. But he needed something to set him apart. What I need, Tamatoa told himself, is a look. So Tamatoa went about finding one. He tried covering himself with rocks, with kelp, even with prickly sea urchins. But nothing was quite working until one fateful day, something sparkly fell from the ocean above. It was a shiny necklace. Tamatoa placed it on his shell. I'm beautiful, he declared. From then on, Tamatoa was hooked. He searched far and wide for other sparkly things to add to his collection, becoming more and more obsessed with his shiny appearance. He stole precious items from humans and from his fellow monsters, making new enemies wherever he went. And with each new treasure, he felt more powerful. He even crossed paths with Maui for the first time, though that didn't end well for Tamatoa. Over the years, his collection grew and grew, and when he stumbled upon Maui's fish hook, lost in the sea after Maui was exiled, Tamatoa decided he was the most amazing, most crabulous monster there ever was. And then you and Maui came, cried one of the kids listening to her story. That's right, Moana said. With teamwork and some shiny distractions, we were able to get his fish hook back. But what happened to Tamatoa? One of them asked Moana. Well, he was stuck on his back for a little while. He yelled for help, but he'd been so selfish and taken from so many of the other monsters, they began stealing from him. When Tamatoa finally got back on his claws, he had to start collecting all over again. Hopefully, he learned that treating others well is better than being shiny, Moana finished. Disney Moana, waiting for Moana. Wearing her grandma's necklace with the heart of Te Fiti tucked safely inside, Moana pulled the sail and crossed the reef. She steered her canoe toward the constellation of Maui's fishhook, determined to find the demigod and make him restore the heart of Te Fiti. Meanwhile, Pua let out a great big yawn, waking from a lovely night's sleep. He rolled onto his back and wiggled around, giving it a good scratch. Suddenly, he smelled something sweet and delicious. He followed the scent and found a ripe banana. He picked it up and trotted off, excited to share it with his best friend Moana. But Moana was not on the shore. Pua rushed to the edge of the cliff and spotted a canoe in the distance. Pua jumped up, trying to get a better look. He scrambled onto an even higher rocky edge. From there, he could see it was Moana, and she was sailing beyond the reef. Pua grabbed a paddle and hurried toward the ocean, ready to swim out to join her. But before he could jump in, he froze with fear. The last time he had been in the ocean, Moana had to rescue him. Now he was afraid of the water. Pua dropped the paddle and sat down. He stared out at the water, watching Moana's canoe get smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. He waited all day to see if Moana would come back, but his eyelids grew so heavy that he finally fell asleep. The next day, Sina tried to take him back to the village. "Come on, Pua," she said, "I'll feed you." But Pua didn't budge. "I miss Moana too," Sina continued, "but she will come back to us. We have to eat, so we'll be strong when she returns." Still, Pua refused to move, so Sina took the food and water to him on the beach. Pua just looked at it. He wasn't feeling very hungry. The following day, Sina found Pua in the same spot. She sat with him, and the two stared out at the ocean. "I wonder where Moana is right now," she said. "I hope she is safe." Sina looked at Pua and sighed. "I know you do too." She smiled as she scratched his chin the way Moana often would. Sina turned to Pua. "If we stay busy, perhaps the time will move faster and Moana will be home before we know it." She suggested Pua go for a swim and led him toward the water. Squeech! As a little wave splashed up on Pua's feet, he squealed and ran back to dry land. He was still afraid. Sina laughed. "Pua," she said, "you have been swimming with Moana since you were a little piglet." Pua's ears dropped low. "And I'm sure you'll want to swim with her when she gets back." "Come in," she said, coaxing Pua into the water. "One step at a time. You can do it." Pua waddled further and further in until his feet lifted off the ground and he began floating. But when he couldn't feel the ocean floor, he panicked and hurried to the sand, plopping down in his usual spot. Sina stood in the water and held out her arms. "I won't let you go until you're ready," she said, smiling. Pua liked Sina. She reminded him of Moana. He went back into the water, and soon he was paddling around. He was so happy. When Moana returned, he wouldn't be afraid to go in the ocean with her. Pua was very proud of himself. He couldn't contain his excitement and didn't even notice when he ran into tapa cloth drying on a rope. The children giggled and followed Pua all over the village. Soon enough, Moana was back. She had succeeded in her mission to restore the heart of Te Fiti. Pua squealed with delight and leapt into her arms, covering her with kisses. His best friend was home, and he was more than ready to join her on the next ocean adventure. Disney Moana. Moana makes a kite. Today marked the island's annual kite festival. It was Moana's favorite day, and she couldn't wait to start gathering supplies. This year, she planned on making a kite inspired by a seabird. Every year, Moana built a new kite with her mother, Sina. At first, her kites barely lifted off the ground, but as she grew older, they got better and bigger and bolder. Moana loved surprising everyone with her creative designs year after year. Together, Moana and Sina spread all the supplies out on the mat. "I know what you need," Sina said. She handed Moana several pieces of tapa cloth. "I've been saving these for you." Moana hugged her mom. "Thank you," she said. "This is going to be the greatest seabird kite to ever fly." Moana knew that the kite had to have a strong foundation. They would need a lot of rope to lash the sticks and palm fronds together. Moana and Sina pounded the fibers from the coconut husks until they were flat. Then they braided them and wove them together to make the rope as long as possible. After that was done, Moana constructed the frame. Next, Moana moved onto the kite's fabric. She worked the tapa cloth together until she had a piece large enough to cover the entire frame. Then, Sina helped Moana paint the tapa. Once it dried, Moana decorated it by stamping on shapes inspired by the oceans and mountains of Motunui. The tapa is ready. Let's tie it to the frame, Moana said. After that was done, they added the guide rope for Moana to steer and control the kite. And now for the finishing touch, Moana said, in honor of our family. With that, she tied a few royal red feathers to the kite's tail. It was time to test the kite. Moana held the rope and handed Sina the kite. Hold it as high as you can, and I'll tell you when to let go, Moana said. Moana felt the wind blow against her back. She walked into it until the guide rope pulled tight, and she knew it was time. Now, she yelled. Sina tossed the kite into the air, where it caught the breeze and lifted off. We did it, exclaimed Moana. Building the kite had been so exciting, Moana had lost track of time. The sun was low in the sky. She had to return to the festival immediately. There you are, Chief Tui said to Moana as she ran up. I've been looking forward to seeing what surprise you have for us this year. I think this is our best one yet. Wait until you see it fly, she said. When Moana lifted her kite, it felt heavier than before, but she managed to get it into the air and watch it delight as it climbed higher and higher. Suddenly, the kite took an unexpected dive, and Moana steered herself, preparing for a crash landing. Out of nowhere, though, it shot right back up. It twirled to the left, then swooped to the right, and dove directly for Moana. It was out of control. Moana couldn't make sense of the runway kite. It was like it had mind of its own. She struggled and pulled the guide rope with all her might, but no matter what she did, nothing worked. The kite took another nosedive, and that's when she saw it. Or rather, she saw him. Heihei? Heihei, Moana shouted. You are flying. Moana was shocked to realize the rooster had gotten tangled up in the kite and had taken off with it. Now, every time he flapped his wings, the kite changed directions. You are doing great, Moana cheered, but she didn't want him to fall, so Moana slowly and gently lowered the kite to the ground. As soon as she could, she grabbed Heihei. What a festival to remember. Great job, everyone. Especially you, Heihei, Tui said. Moana grinned from ear to ear. I couldn't have done it without you, she said to Heihei. Thanks for helping me make a kite that no one will ever forget. Indeed, Moana made a remarkable impression that year because, best of all, her kite had given flight to her friend. Disney Moana, Wave Rider. Grandma Tala and Moana went for a walk on their favorite Motunui beach. They watched as some of the village children tried to ride the ocean waves. I wish I could do that, Moana said, before plopping into the sand. Tell me the story, Grandma, please, the one about you. Grandma Tala smiled and sat down next to Moana before beginning the tale. When I was young, I was a lot like you. I loved being in the water. I would run to it whenever I could, playing and dancing with the waves. You still do, said Moana. Yes, I still do. Now quiet down and listen. My friends, the manta rays, would join me, and I would watch them ride the waves, their bodies gracefully sailing across each crest. Sometimes I would try to do it right along with them. We would glide along the water, and all I could hear and see was the ocean and the sky. One day, while I was out playing with the rays, a big wave tossed me onto the sand like a sea cucumber. It was only when I heard laughter that I realized I was not alone. All my friends were there, watching me. But the only one who didn't laugh was Asolele, the wood carver. I didn't want to be laughed at, but oh, how I wanted to ride those waves. So whatever I could, I'd sneak out of the water and try again, and again. Then I'd wipe out and get right back to it. I would be like that too, Grandma, said Moana. I know you would. You're very determined. But back to the story. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. A bird appeared in the distance. It looked like it was standing on the water. As it came closer, I could see it was on a piece of driftwood. I admired the beautiful bird as it rode the wave, perfectly poised. It sped by me, the wind ruffling its feathers. I took one last look and I knew I had to do that. The next morning, I started searching for something to write on. I tried everything I could find. Big pieces of bark, banana leaves, paddles. But most of the time, I would just fall right off. And even when I was able to stay on, everything quickly bent, broke, or sunk. I kept on for days. I was determined to feel like that bird. Then one night, as I watched Asolele carving by the fire, I had an idea. I would make a board. I drew a design in the sand, and Asolele agreed to help me. He patiently showed me how to carve, sand, and polish the wood. It took a lot of hard work, but soon my board was ready. It was beautiful, and I couldn't wait to try it. So early one morning, I took it to the ocean. I paddled out as far as I dared. Then I floated, waiting for the right wave. I knew I had to be patient. When a good wave came, I went for it. Did I ride it to shore? Of course not. The people who were watching me were probably saying, "Crazy, crazy Tala, give it up already." But when I saw the rays, I knew I couldn't give up on something that I felt so strongly about in my heart. When my wave approached, I was ready. Slowly, I stood up, poised and balanced, and the wave carried me across the water with the wind in my feathers, just like that bird. "You don't have feathers, Grandma," Moana giggled. "I did that day, Moana. Oh, I had wings." My friends cheered on the shore, and the loudest of them all was Asolele, your grandfather. Moana clapped her hands. I love that story. Grandma Tala smiled. "Are you ready to give it a try?" Moana paddled into the ocean next to Grandma Tala. She was determined to keep trying no matter how many times she was wiped out. It wasn't long before the day came when Grandma Tala and Moana flew across the water like birds of a feather together. Disney Moana, The Misadventures of Heihei. Maui and Moana were on a journey to get Maui's fishhook back from Lalotai, the realm of monsters. While Moana tied her canoe to the shore, Maui sprinkled a handful of bird seeds in front of Heihei. Maui thought Heihei might make a tasty snack if he fattened up. Moana and Maui started their climb to the entrance of Lalotai. Heihei didn't even notice they were gone as he aimlessly walked around the deck of the canoe with a tap, tap, tap. Not even one peck he made landed on the seed. A lizard approached, eyeing the kernels of food. He looked Heihei up and down. The lizard moved closer and began to feast on the seeds. Heihei continued to peck the deck until he pecked the wrong spot and the lizard's tail was caught on his beak. The lizard lost his tail all the time. So he took one last bite and scurried off, leaving his tail behind. A hungry seabird swooped down and grabbed the tail. It flew onto the sky, taking the tail, and Heihei with it. The bird shook the tail this way and that until Heihei fell off. A gust of wind threw his wings open wide, and he began to glide. Heihei sailed across the sky, the breeze whipped through his feathers and wobbling his wattle. Down Heihei went until his foot caught on a tiny branch. He hung there for a moment, then, snap, the branch broke. Heihei tumbled down and landed in shallow water. He started to walk, straight into a kelp forest. The long seaweed spiraled around Heihei's body, wrapping him up like a present. He walked slower and slower, dragging the tangled mess of kelp along. He hopped on a plank of driftwood. It went up, 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 and up some more. When Heihei neared the end of the plank, it tilted down, 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 closer to the crashing waves of the ocean. A piece of the kelp that was wrapped around Heihei got stuck in a crack. So instead of walking into the ocean, Heihei marched in place. Below the ocean, Moana searched for Maui in Lalotai, where monsters lurked around every corner. She hid from a group of oversized, eight-eyed bats, but a four-armed monster appeared and moved towards her. She was cornered. As Moana tried to come up with a plan, a powerful geyser blasted the monster straight up and out of Lalotai. The four-armed monster landed on the opposite side of the plank Heihei was marching on. Flop! In a flash, the piece of kelp broke off and Heihei shot toward the sun. All the four-armed monster saw was a terrifying kelp monster coming straight for him. Heihei let out a loud scream as he sailed across the sky. The four-armed monster hid in a cave, vowing never to leave. Heihei landed on top of a slender tree and spied a small coconut. Tap, tap, tap. He pecked at it again and again until he picked up the whole coconut in his beak and swallowed it whole. As soon as it slid down his throat, it knocked him off balance, and he fell out of the tree. Heihei coughed up the coconut, gave it a peck, and walked off the island back into the water. The ocean had had enough of Heihei's nonsense. Whoosh! It grabbed him and zoomed him back into Moana's canoe. At the same time, with Maui's magical fish hook in hand, Maui and Moana rode an exploding geyser out of Lalotai. Maui and Moana landed safely on the rocky shore, and while Maui was trying to figure out why he couldn't use his hook to shapeshift, Heihei continued walking, clucking and pecking at the canoe, like he had never left. Disney Moana, A Path to the Sea. Moana loved the ocean. She loved swimming, canoeing, and walking along the shore. When Moana was old enough, Grandma Tala taught her how to surf, and Moana spent a lot of time trying to ride the waves. One day, as Moana and Pua waited for a wave, a sea turtle paddled toward them. She swam directly up to Moana, and it looked right at her. Moana watched as she floated beside her. "Hello," Moana said. The sea turtle stayed with Moana and Pua, playing with them in the water all day long. When Moana surfed, The turtle seemed to do the same behind her, even letting Pua stand on her back. "You like to surf too?" Moana said, smiling at the sea turtle. Moana thought for a moment. "I will call you Lolo," she said. When the sun started to set, Moana lifted her surfboard out of the water. "Bye, Lolo," she said, feeling only a little sad. Somehow she knew she would see her friend again. One night, Moana stayed on the shore after dark. She gasped in surprise when she saw her friend Lolo. "Your turtle friend just laid eggs in the hole she dug," Grandma Tala said. "Those are nesting grounds." She told Moana how the baby turtles would make their way to the ocean after hatching. "How do the babies even know to go to the ocean?" Moana asked. "They listen to their hearts," Grandma Tala said. Moana checked the nesting grounds every day. She wondered when the baby turtles would hatch, and she'd hoped she would get to see them. One day, Moana and Pua were surfing when the sky turned gray. They quickly paddled to shore. As the rain poured down, they raced back to the village. When they got home, they watched the trees bend and sway as they listened to the music of the raindrops. Soon after the storm was over, the sun came out. Moana grabbed her surfboard and hurried back to the ocean. When she got there, she couldn't believe her eyes. The storm had knocked a coconut tree right on top of the nesting grounds. Luckily, the eggs were safely buried deep underground. But what if the baby sea turtles hatch? She wondered. They could be trapped. Moana had to do something. She ran back to the village and told her friends what had happened. "The eggs will hatch any day," she explained. Her friends agreed to help, and Moana led them to the site. "Hurry," urged Moana. "Let's carry it away from the nest." They all worked together to carefully clear the fallen tree. "We did it," cheered Moana, breathing a big sigh of relief. The next day, Moana and Grandma Tala were dancing with the ocean waves when Moana saw something move in the nesting grounds. "Grandma, look," she said excitedly. "Lolo's eggs were hatching." They watched as the baby sea turtles made their way out of the nest. When a seabird swooped in and tried to capture one of the baby turtles, Moana waved her arms and Pua chased the bird away. Moana and her friends protected the newborns, determined to see that each and every one made it safely to the water. Later that day, when Moana and Pua went surfing, Lolo and her little sea turtles swam around them, paddling and playing together. Moana smiled. She felt great knowing that she had helped Lolo's baby sea turtles, and there was no better way to celebrate than by enjoying the ocean together. Disney Moana, Pua and Heihei. The feast to welcoming spring was about to start. Moana and Grandma Tala were busy collecting shells. Moana was making her father a surprise gift for the feast, an inklet. Pua tried to help too, but the shells he found were never empty. In the village, preparations for the feast had begun. While everyone was hard at work, Heihei just got in the way. Men were busy building the an underground oven. They piled pieces of wood and the dried husk of the shells of coconuts. After they started the fire, they added the rocks. It wasn't long before the umu was hot enough for roast bananas, fish, and vegetable called taro. Heihei got closer and closer to the hot rocks. "You'll set yourself on fire, you silly bird," the men yelled, chasing him away. Heihei ran away and stepped on a partially finished platter woven from Pandura's leaves. His tiny foot got trapped. He didn't even notice as he dragged the large platter behind him. Grandma Tala attempted to catch him, but Heihei avoided her, leaving a mess in his wake. Grandma Tala reached again for Heihei, but she slipped on the platter. Luckily, Moana was there to catch her. Nobody noticed when the anklet Moana had made dropped from her belt. It landed around Heihei's neck, and he dashed away. "That's it," Grandma Tala said, grabbing a hand-woven leaf basket. Heihei didn't see her coming. He was too busy picking at a rack. With one fell swoop, Grandma Tala trapped him in the basket and clinched it shut. Grandma had been so focused on catching the rooster that she hadn't noticed the anklet around his neck. "You can't keep him in there forever, Grandma," said Moana. "But we can keep him in there for a little while," said Grandma Tala. "At least until we're done with the feast." Moana agreed it was a good idea, so Grandma put the basket aside. Then Moana checked her belt. She gasped when she realized the anklet was missing. "Oh no. Perhaps we should retrace her steps," said Grandma Tala. Pua saw Heihei's peak sticking out between the gasps in the woven basket. When he looked closer, Pua noticed the anklet around the rooster's neck. He was determined to retrieve it for Moana. Pua found a long vine and looped it around the basket. He dragged the basket along, running as fast as he could. Heihei's legs slipped out and he ran to keep up. Pua dragged the basket toward a tree and tossed it onto a branch. When Pua pounced on the branch, Heihei's basket flew into the air and then back down to the branch again. The higher Pua bounced, the higher the basket flew. Finally, Pua bounced so high that the branch flung the basket straight into him. The two animals soared through the sky. Pua and Heihei squealed and clucked with glee. When they hit the ground, the basket finally opened. Pua was thrilled. He could get the anklet to Moana, but the force of the fall caused them to roll. They rolled and rolled right into a large fishing net. Then they continued rolling, getting more and more tangled in the net. By then, the festival had started, and Pua and Heihei rolled right up to Moana. Moana untangled them and gasped when she saw the anklet around Pua's snout. "You found it," she said, giving him a big hug. Later that evening, Moana gave her father the anklet, and he proudly put it on. As Moana and her father hugged, Pua heard a strange sound. It was Heihei. The rooster couldn't cluck because his beak was buried in a piece of driftwood. He'd also gotten tangled up in the pieces of basket again. Luckily, Pua had become an expert at getting Heihei out of tricky situations.